Hello, thank you for your interest in volunteering for the School District of Philadelphia. We are so grateful that you will be sharing your time and talents with our students. Let's get started. In this presentation, we'll cover the basics of volunteering in the School District of Philadelphia so that you're ready to jump right in once you start volunteering. First, we'll give you an overview of who we are as an organization. Then, we'll tell you why volunteers like you are so crucial to the success of our students. The next part of our orientation will dive into the paperwork that is required for all adults who want to volunteer in our buildings. We'll talk about what the Volunteer Code of Conduct is, along with which clearances you'll need and how to obtain them. We will also go over important safety measures regarding child abuse. By the end of this orientation, you'll know how to recognize the signs of child abuse, as well as know the appropriate steps to take to report potential abuse, and what our Welcoming Schools resolution means. Lastly, we'll end the orientation with a short quiz that will test your knowledge on what we've learned today. Let's start by going over who we are as an organization and school district. The School District of Philadelphia is guided by the Board of Education's vision for all School District of Philadelphia students to thrive, succeed, and lead in a global society. To fulfill this vision, the Board of Education established goals and guardrails that outline what our students must know and be able to accomplish, and describe conditions needed in each school to empower all students to succeed in and beyond the classroom. The ultimate goal is to ensure that every student performs at or above grade level at schools that are safe and welcoming, anti-racist, and well-rounded. Altogether, we serve over 119,000 students. Our students come from a diverse range of backgrounds and experiences, something that we take pride in. We have 218 schools and counting, with over 20,000 employees. Each of our schools is unique and has its own strengths and needs. The School District of Philadelphia's 5 academic goals for students are as follows: making sure specific percentages of students are rated proficient on reading and math and state assessments, along with making sure specific percentages of students are rated proficient on all 3 state high school assessments, and that a specific percentage of career and technical education students will pass their respective industry standards-based competency assessments.
Next, let's talk about our district's guardrails. These are guiding values that allow us to work to make sure all our students have access to a safe, welcoming, anti-racist, and well-rounded education. Our first guardrail is that every school will be a safe, welcoming, and a healthy place for all students, staff, and community to learn. Our schools will be physically safe and clean with an inclusive environment. Students will have access to social, emotional, and mental health supports. Our second guardrail is that students will have a well-rounded education with opportunities in the arts and athletics. Our third guardrail is that parents and guardians will be encouraged to be partners in their students' school community. Volunteers such as yourself are vital when it comes to accomplishing our third guardrail. Our fourth and last guardrail is that students' potential and achievement will not be limited by practices that maintain systemic racism. With so many schools and such a diverse student body, we rely on volunteers to help our staff provide the best education and opportunities possible for our students. Raising the next generation is a shared responsibility that we should all take part in. Before we begin talking about the paperwork required to volunteer, we'd like to mention why volunteers such as yourself are so important. Among so many other things, volunteers in our schools support student learning, help to maintain schools, help our students reach their full potential, aid their community, and pitch in to make sure our schools run smoothly. Volunteers in our schools are also integral when it comes to accomplishing our third district guardrail. When family volunteers help out at our schools, they become active and engaged partners in our schools. Now that you know a little more about the School District of Philadelphia, we hope you feel inspired and excited to volunteer. There is one big step you'll need to take before you get started, though. Yes, we're talking about paperwork. But don't worry, We're going to go over every piece of paperwork you need, as well as how to obtain that paperwork, so that you can begin volunteering as soon as possible. All adults who want to volunteer in the School District of Philadelphia will need to turn in a volunteer packet to the main office of their school. By turning in all of your paperwork in one packet, your school will be able to review clearances and check for paperwork completion more efficiently, which will in turn lead to you being able to volunteer much sooner. The volunteer packet must include the following components: the Volunteer Code of Conduct Agreement, the Child Abuse History Clearance, the Pennsylvania State Criminal Record Check, the FBI background check or a signed volunteer affirmation sheet, and a certificate of volunteer orientation completion, which you'll receive after you're done with this training. We'll go over how to access and fill out all of this paperwork in the next few sections. You might be wondering, does anyone who enters a school need to turn in a volunteer packet? The short answer is no. Only adults, people 18 and older, who are in the school as volunteers need to turn in a volunteer packet. Adults who are visitors to the school do not need to turn in a volunteer packet. The School District of Philadelphia distinguishes between volunteers and visitors. Visitors are viewed as individuals who are attending and/or observing an event or activity without providing a service to the students, staff, school, or district operations, and who would not be responsible for the care, supervision, guidance, or control of children. Some examples of these events would include, but are not limited to, back-to-school nights, parent-teacher conferences, school assemblies, school concerts, and Halloween parades. Volunteers are defined as any adult applying for or holding an unpaid position with a school or program, activity or service, or a person responsible for a child's welfare or having direct contact with children. Examples may include, but are not limited to, tutors or mentors, field trip chaperones, library helpers, front desk helpers, and/or regular field day or party helpers.
Before we continue, we recommend that you first contact the school in which you are hoping to volunteer and ask if they have any volunteer positions open before you move forward in the process of completing your volunteer packet. Once you finish all of your paperwork, you should bring your completed volunteer packet to your school and give it to the school secretary, who will then pass it on to the principal and the Office of Employee Records for review. Please note that it is best for you to keep a record of all the documents in your volunteer packet for safekeeping. After your paperwork is reviewed, it will be kept on file in a secure storage unit and secure district-maintained database. Once the principal signs off on your volunteer code of conduct agreement, you can begin volunteering. We know that all of this paperwork is overwhelming and time-consuming. The good news is that each piece of your volunteer packet is valid for 60 months or 5 years from the date that you obtained it. This means that you will not have to turn in a new volunteer packet or take this volunteer orientation every school year. Plus, if you want to volunteer at another school or if your child switches schools, you can use your existing volunteer packet in the new school if the paperwork is fewer than 60 months old. Just sign a new volunteer code of conduct so the principal can approve you, and you'll be all set. The first component of the volunteer packet is the volunteer code of conduct. The purpose of the volunteer code of conduct is to explain expectations and standards for volunteers in the School District of Philadelphia. The volunteer code of conduct summarizes the standard behavior, professionalism, and respect that all volunteers must adhere to when in our schools. All volunteers must read, agree to, and sign the volunteer code of conduct before volunteering with the School District of Philadelphia. If volunteers breach any of the standards in the code of conduct, district staff have grounds for barring the individual from volunteering in the school. The first standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers will sign in at the school's main office immediately upon arrival. This is required by School District of Philadelphia Policy 907, School Visitors. Policy 907 clearly states that upon arrival at the school, the visitor must sign the visitor's register in the school office where the visitor will be given instructions as well as a visitor's pass or identification badge and, if necessary, provided with an escort. The second standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers will follow the directions of the building administrators, teachers, and/or appropriate staff members. Classroom volunteering and/or observations should be scheduled with the consent of the classroom teacher and/or appropriate administrator. Please remember that for some grade levels and students, the presence of parents in the classroom may cause a disruption. Therefore, it is up to the teacher and/or appropriate administrator as to when and how parents and/or family members are allowed to observe classroom activities. If parents, caregivers, or family members disagree with the determination the school has made, they have the right to submit a complaint through the district's constituent concern process.
The third standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers agree to conduct themselves in a professional, respectful manner at all times, with the understanding that they are role models for the students. In general, volunteers should be aware of the language used while volunteering, wear the appropriate clothing for a school setting, use an indoor voice to avoid causing distractions. Lastly, volunteers should treat all individuals, students, staff, parents, and other volunteers with respect. The fourth standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers understand that they are responsible for following the policy and procedures of the School District of Philadelphia, that they understand that the School District of Philadelphia has a strong commitment to diversity and inclusion, and that they will uphold these values while volunteering. Volunteers are responsible for respecting the district's commitment that every student feels included, regardless of their respective identity. Additionally, volunteers must treat all students with respect and always use a student's preferred name and/or pronouns. Volunteers also agree to refrain from sharing their personal or political views with students while volunteering. And if they have any questions about this, they will ask a staff member. The fifth standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers will share with teachers and/or administrators when they have any concerns related to a student's welfare or safety. The basic rule of thumb here is, if you see something, say something. We all need to work together to ensure our students are safe. If volunteers suspect a child is being abused or neglected, they can speak to staff members or make a report directly to Childline. We will cover this more in depth later in the orientation. Reporting your suspicion either to Childline or to a staff member does not mean the child will be separated from their family. The sixth standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers will only use adult bathroom facilities. Volunteers should not be in private, unsupervised spaces, such as bathrooms or locker rooms with students. Volunteers should ask the main office staff if they are unsure where the adult bathroom is located or need a key to access it. Again, this is about keeping our students as safe as possible. The seventh standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers will not possess weapons of any type while on school property or during school events off the premises. School District Policy 218.1 on weapons states that possession of weapons in the school setting is a threat to the safety of students and staff and is prohibited by law.
The eighth standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers will not possess or use tobacco or any nicotine-related products and will not possess or be under the influence of alcohol, marijuana, or illegal drugs on school property or during school events off premises. Again, please note that any tobacco and/or drug or alcohol usage is prohibited while on school grounds. The ninth standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers understand that if they happen to learn private or sensitive information in the course of volunteering, they are not to share this information with anyone. This information must remain confidential. Examples of information that should remain confidential include the following: student records, health information, attendance reports, conduct reports, court reports, student grades and test scores, applications for status and federal assistance, gender, sexual identity of an individual, immigration status of an individual. The Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, protects this information from being shared without consent. The 10th standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers agree to avoid exploiting students or influencing them into engaging in illegal or immoral behavior. Again, all volunteers are expected to act as role models to students. This includes following school and district policies as well as state and federal laws. Volunteers should encourage students to strive for excellence both academically and behaviorally. Do not influence any student to do anything illegal or immoral, as well as anything that would cause them to get in trouble with their school. The 11th standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers agree that they will not engage in sexual harassment of students, other volunteers, or school employees, and that they will avoid inappropriate contact with students. Child abuse will not be tolerated in the school district of Philadelphia. There are appropriate and inappropriate ways of interacting with students. These will be covered later in the orientation. Volunteers are expected to interact with students, staff, and other volunteers in appropriate ways at all times. The 12th and final standard in the Volunteer Code of Conduct states that volunteers agree to notify the school immediately if they are arrested for a misdemeanor or felony related to drugs, sex, assault, or weapons. According to School District Policy 916 on volunteers, volunteers must make a written report to the principal or appropriate administrator within 72 hours regarding an arrest or conviction. The principal or appropriate administrator will then immediately require a volunteer to submit new certifications if they have a reasonable belief that the volunteer was arrested for or has been convicted of an offense required to be reported by law, was named as a perpetrator in a founded or indicated report, or has provided written notice of such occurrence. Failure to accurately report such occurrences may subject the volunteer to disciplinary action up to and including denial of volunteer service and criminal prosecution.
Volunteers in our schools should be aware of the School District of Philadelphia's Welcoming Sanctuary Schools Resolution. The resolution details procedures for how school and district personnel will address a potential visit from Immigration Customs Enforcement, or ICE. While volunteers do not need to learn these procedures, it is important that volunteers know that district schools welcome all students, regardless of documentation status. Additionally, volunteers should not inquire about nor share any information regarding documentation status of students in the course of their volunteering. In the event of ICE coming to a school, volunteers should do the following: immediately alert the school principal or designee and any on-site school safety officer that agents are on school grounds, as will be required for any unexpected or unscheduled visitor coming on school grounds. Do not provide any information about individual students, families, or employees under any circumstances, unless directed to do so by the Office of General Counsel. Remain calm and limit communication to connecting the agent with the school principal or designee. Do not consent to agents accessing school facilities without the Office of General Counsel's approval. Do not physically impede, interfere with, or obstruct an ICE agent in the performance of his or her duties. If ICE does not comply with your directions, contact school safety. The next component of the volunteer packet is obtaining the proper clearances. The School District of Philadelphia requires all adults who volunteer in our schools to have their clearances on file. This is to keep our students as safe as possible. All volunteers need 3 security clearances: the Child Abuse History Clearance, the Pennsylvania State Criminal Record Check, and either the FBI background check with fingerprinting or a signed volunteer affirmation. Please note that these are 3 different clearances managed by 3 different entities and not the School District of Philadelphia. Don't worry though, you can find all the information for how to complete these clearances on our website, which we will talk more about soon. Both the Child Abuse and PA Criminal Record Check clearances are free and available online. You can go to www.philasd.org/face/volunteer to find the links to the clearance websites. A link to our website will be displayed after we talk about the different clearances. In order to obtain each clearance, you will need to create an account online, which will ask for personal information such as your name and contact information. Because you are a volunteer, these clearances are free. Simply check off volunteer when creating your account online, and the fee will be waived. After you create an account and submit your clearance request, the clearance results will be sent to your email address.
Lastly, you'll need to obtain either an FBI background check with fingerprinting or sign a volunteer affirmation sheet. If you have lived in the state of Pennsylvania for the past 10 years consecutively, you should sign the volunteer affirmation sheet. This states that you swear to having lived in Pennsylvania for the past 10 years and that during that time you have not committed any federal crimes. The volunteer affirmation sheet is free and available online at www.philasd.org/face/#volunteer. If you have not lived in Pennsylvania for the past 10 consecutive years, you will need to complete an FBI background check with complete fingerprinting at a designated Identigo location. The FBI background check costs $23.25. It is the only volunteer clearance that costs money. The best way to complete the FBI background check is to go to our website at www.philasd.org/face/#volunteer. We will display the link further on in this presentation, so don't worry.
In summary, all volunteers must have the following clearances on file at a school before they begin volunteering: the Child Abuse History Clearance, the Pennsylvania Criminal Record Check, and the FBI background check or a signed volunteer affirmation. As mentioned earlier, each of your clearances will be valid for 60 months or 5 years from the date they are issued, so you will not have to obtain clearances at the start of every school year, unless one or more has expired.
We as a district realize that this process can be time-consuming. In an effort to simplify the process of completing clearances, you can find all of the information about clearances as well as step-by-step guidance for each clearance on our website. Just go to www.philasd.org/face/#volunteer.
If you do not have an email address, please contact your school's main office for help or talk to your school's family engagement liaison. We also know that the clearance process is confusing. Here are some common questions and answers that we hope will help clear up your concerns. If something comes up on your background clearance, please know that the School District of Philadelphia considers other factors, such as the following: the nature and gravity of the offense or offenses, the time that has passed since the conviction and/or sentence, the nature of the volunteer work for which the applicant is requesting to volunteer, and the positive impact the individual has had within the community since the offense. District staff will review background clearances and determine if information is disclosed that should bar the individual from volunteering in the school. If principals have questions about information disclosed on background clearances, they should email the Deputy of Student Rights and Responsibilities. Any volunteer who is barred from volunteering in a school as a result of a clearance may appeal the school-based decision by emailing parentappeals@philasd.org. In addition, please note that not having a Social Security number doesn't mean an individual cannot volunteer. It is still possible to volunteer regardless of an individual's documentation status. Government documentation is only required for the FBI background check. The Child Abuse History Clearance and Pennsylvania State Criminal Record Check do not require government identification, nor the volunteer affirmation sheet. If an individual has lived in Pennsylvania for the past 10 years and fills out the child abuse and criminal record clearances and the volunteer affirmation, they may be able to volunteer. If an undocumented individual has not lived in Pennsylvania for 10 years and cannot sign the volunteer affirmation, it is still possible to volunteer. The School District of Philadelphia aims to include as many families as possible in its volunteer program, and as such, the district is flexible with individuals who do not have Social Security numbers. The district allows individuals to volunteer without the FBI background check on file as long as the following conditions are met. The individual has their child abuse history clearance on file. The individual has their Pennsylvania State Criminal Record Check on file. And the individual has a school district employee with them as a supervisor at all times. Still have questions? Feel free to call the FACE Office Volunteer Line at 215-400-4180, option 6. In order to volunteer in our schools, it's very important that all volunteers understand their role in keeping our students safe, including how to identify signs of child abuse and what to do if a child exhibits these signs.
It is vital that volunteers have general knowledge of the signs of child abuse and what to do if they suspect potential cases of child abuse. Protecting our students is a shared responsibility in which we expect everyone, including volunteers, to take part. Next, we'll talk about how we can look for the signs of and potentially report suspected child abuse. Before we move on, though, it is important to talk about mandated versus permissive reporters of suspected child abuse. Any school district staff or independent contractors working on behalf of the district are mandated reporters, which means they must report suspected child abuse. Volunteers, unlike school district staff members, are permissive reporters. This means that they are encouraged to report suspected child abuse, but they are not required to do so by law. While permissive reporters are not required by law to say or do anything, we hope that if you see something suspicious in the course of volunteering, you will say something to a district staff member. As a permissive reporter, you can choose to talk to a school leader or make the call to Childline yourself. The rest of this orientation will give you some tools and a high-level overview of the potential signs of child abuse so you can be a bit more educated on this topic. The first step in identifying signs of child abuse is to know how to define child abuse itself. At its most basic form, child abuse and neglect is defined under federal law as any recent act or failure to act which results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse or exploitation of a child, and an act or failure to act which presents an imminent risk of serious harm to a child. Of course, there are forms of verbal and physical interactions between adults and children that are appropriate. These include praising a child and positively reinforcing good work or behavior, as well as patting a child on the back, holding the hand of a young child as they get off the bus, and briefly hugging a child as long as the child appears to be comfortable and the physical contact is not romanticized or sexually intimate in any way. Inappropriate or harmful verbal and physical interactions between adults and children will not be tolerated. These include, but are not limited to, sexually provocative or degrading comments, risque jokes, having a child sit on your lap, intimate, romantic, or sexual contact, corporal punishment, and showing or involving a child in pornographic activities. There are different types of child abuse. We'll be going over 4 types in this orientation, the first of which is physical abuse. Physical abuse is defined as any physical injury or death inflicted by other than accidental means. Signs of physical abuse can include, but are not limited to, any of the following: unexplained burns, unexplained bruises on the face, lip, mouth, back, buttocks, and thighs, dental or head injuries, human bites, multiple hospital visits, a child who seems frightened of their parents and does not want to go home, a child who fears being with a particular staff member, physical force used by caregivers, and a child who seems too eager to please others. Again, this list is not definitive. A child may exhibit these signs without experiencing abuse, or a child may be experiencing physical abuse but not exhibit any of the signs that we've listed. The next type of child abuse that we'll discuss is sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is defined as occurring when a person uses power over a child and directly involves the child in any sexual act, involves the child in pornography, or forces the child to witness sexual acts. Signs of sexual abuse can include any of the following: the child suddenly refuses to participate in physical activities, the child has difficulty or pain in walking or sitting, the child has frequent and unexplained sore throats, the child has yeast or urinary infections, the child has torn or bloody underclothes, the child aggressively initiates sexual contact with another child, the child has unusual sexual knowledge or behavior, child-to-child sexual contact, the child has bruises on their inner thighs, the child has fear of being alone with a particular individual, the child suffers from sleep disorders, and anxiety, irritability, or constant inattentiveness. Again, we want to emphasize that this is not an all-inclusive list. A child may show these signs and not be experiencing child abuse, or a child may be experiencing sexual abuse and not show any of these signs at all. Remember, you can always turn to a staff member if you are unsure or have questions. The next form of child abuse that we will discuss is emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is defined as a pattern of harmful interactions between the parent or guardian and the child. This may include behaviors such as criticizing, belittling, rejecting, or withholding love, resulting in impaired psychological growth and development. Signs of emotional abuse can include eating disorders like anorexia or bulimia, nervous habits such as biting nails, washing hands excessively, or showing extreme anxiety, cruel behavior such as using physical force or words to hurt another person or animal, a lack of emotional attachment to a parent or guardian, delayed physical or emotional development, and attempts of suicide. Again, this list is not all-inclusive. Some children may exhibit these signs for a variety of reasons unrelated to emotional abuse. You can always ask a staff member if you are concerned that a child is being emotionally abused. The staff member can help determine whether the child is potentially being emotionally abused, and they can follow up with a report to Childline if they believe it is necessary. The last form of child abuse that we'll go over is neglect. Neglect is defined as the failure of a parent or guardian to provide for a child's basic needs, which include food, shelter, supervision, and clothing, their educational needs, or their medical needs. Neglect may exist because of the refusal to provide or because the family does not have the financial means to provide for their child. Signs of neglect can include begging for or stealing money or food, poor hygiene, unsuitable or dirty clothing, low height and weight average, excessive absences, chronic hunger, assuming adult responsibilities such as caring for younger siblings or cooking meals, behavior that is dull or lethargic, being overly tired, and inappropriately seeking attention. Again, this list is not all-inclusive, and volunteers should turn to staff members if they have any concerns about a child who may be experiencing neglect. Now let's go over how to make a report should you choose to do so. As we went through the various scenarios, we kept referencing something called Childline. Childline is part of a mandated statewide Child Protective Services program designed to accept child abuse referrals and general child well-being concerns and transmit the information quickly to the appropriate investigating agency. If they choose to, volunteers can make a direct report to Childline by calling the Childline hotline at 1-800-932-0313. If volunteers do not feel comfortable making a report, they can always tell a staff member what they observed, and the staff member can make the report to Childline. As mandated reporters, School District of Philadelphia staff members must report potential cases of child abuse. They must make immediate and direct reports of suspected child abuse to Childline.
If a child does happen to confide in you that they may have experienced abuse, you should take the following steps in responding to the child. Listen to the child. Reassure the child. Remain calm and collected. Provide any immediate help you can offer the child to ensure safety. Do not promise the child that you will not tell anyone. We strongly encourage you to go to a staff member after the conversation. Do not share the information that the child disclosed to you with their alleged abuser. Lastly, you can also always call a staff member to handle the situation if you do not feel comfortable having the child confide in you. Child abuse is never black and white. It's often unclear whether to report or not. A good rule of thumb is to always err on the side of the child. Remember, you are not there to investigate the situation or interrogate anyone. If a report is made, the experts from Childline will determine what happened and conduct an investigation. This does not necessarily mean a child will be taken from their home. Still have questions and concerns about child abuse reporting in Pennsylvania? Check out the list of links below. If you have specific questions about what being a permissive reporter means and what is required of you should you choose to file the report, please see the Permissive Reporter FAQ. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our volunteer orientation video. We hope that you found it informative and feel empowered to volunteer. Let's review what we discussed. Today, we learned about who we are as a district and why volunteers such as yourself are so important. We learned about the 5 components of the volunteer packet, as well as child safety and reporting procedures. We also looked at some common questions as well as resources that can help you out if you have any further questions. If you have any additional questions or concerns, please reach out to the Office of Family and Community Engagement by emailing us at volunteer@philasd.org or by calling 215-400-4180, option number 6.
Now that you have finished watching our orientation video, please feel free to review any parts of this video and then go take our quiz so that you can receive your orientation certificate. You can go to www.philasd.org/face/volunteer-video-orientation and click Take the Quiz. After you have completed the quiz, your certificate will be emailed to you in 1 business day. Please bring a copy of your certification in your volunteer packet.
Now that you have finished watching our orientation video, please feel free to review any parts of this video and then go take our quiz so that you can receive your orientation certificate. You can go to www.philasd.org/face/#volunteer to take the quiz. After you have completed the quiz, your certificate will be emailed to you in 1 business day. Please bring a copy of your certification with your volunteer packet.
On behalf of the School District of Philadelphia, we would like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to watch our orientation video, as well as offering to volunteer at our district. Community members such as yourself are what make Philadelphia a great place to live and learn. Thank you.